Marathon.
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 Marathons, which, if you don't know, that's when people choose to run 26 miles.
This whole marathon thing started in 2021, but not how you'd think. See, the world was in a little bit of a pickle. A certain virus was running rampant through the streets, and the only way I knew how to cope with the madness was, you guessed it, lifting. And even though I looked like a slightly bulkier praying mantis, I knew what I was doing. I lifted weight up, occasionally I would lift it multiple times, and with permission, I even dropped it, like the pros. But alas, like most athletes before their big break, I got injured. I watched as my dreams atrophied and died before my very eyes. And after lots of doctor's visits and x-rays, I was told my back needed a break and I should do yoga. Ha! Well, I did. And after a few months, I figured I was basically indestructible. So I went back to the weights with excitement and optimism, and I hurt my back again. So now it's December of 2022, and I had to do some serious reflecting. What was I going to do now? What exercise could I do that wouldn't put unnecessary strain on my back? Well, I hit up one of my good friends for advice, and after some solid, friendly banter, he mentioned that I should take up running, and maybe even a marathon. I started thinking about it, and wait, that was it. 2023 was going to be the year I ran my first marathon. Now, I just needed to find a marathon and train for it. Oh yeah, and I wanted to do it in less than 3 hours and 30 minutes. Finding it was the easy part. The St. George Marathon. Close to home, has some decent downhill, doesn't break the bank, and it was scheduled for October 7th, 2023. Easy. Training? Not so easy. I pulled out my calendar and started planning out how I was going to train for this thing month by month. January was focused on stretching and making sure I wasn't just a walking knot. February was the official start of my training. My first run was absolutely humbling. 2 weeks went by and then I got tendonitis from crappy running form, which took me out for a little bit. So I watched a few videos, fixed my form, and by the end of February, I'd run 34.73 miles. March was good, but one thing I completely underestimated was how much time running takes. Very quickly, my days became an early morning run, head to work, get home, and spend time with family, all while balancing type 1 and everything else in life. Despite trying to find that sweet spot schedule, I ran 54.74 miles. April was the same. Run, work, spend time with family, type 1, and life. Oh yeah, and my wife and I had our first baby, so I only ran like 27.81 miles. In May, I really buckled down. Running, traveling for work, spending time with family, type 1, yada yada. I ran way more than in April with a total of 85.42 miles. June was recovery for May, but every day I'd run, work, spend time with family, manage my type 1, and we got 74.73 miles. In July, I'd run, work, spend time with family, manage my type 1, and I ran 110.2 miles. In August, I'd run, work, spend time with family, and manage my type 1. I ran 116.15 miles. In September, this whole running thing was starting to get to me, but the marathon was close, so I ran, worked, spent time with family, managed my type 1, and I got my highest month mileage for the year with 133.24 miles. Finally, it was October. I was so ready for this. Or so I thought.
All right, it is October 3rd, 4 days before the marathon. We're going to swap out the Dexcom.
With the new Dexcom on, I would have constant blood sugar readings sent directly to my Apple Watch as long as I had my phone on me. But that brought up a problem. Now, in my training, I'd always had my fuel, water, and blood sugar testing kit in the car. But for this marathon, I needed to have them on my person. So like any self-respecting male in his 20s, I called up Jeff Bezos and ordered myself a fanny pack. All right, it is Friday, the day before the marathon. Feeling good. It's a beautiful day, but I have yet to try out running with a pack like this. So we're gonna try it and hopefully it works because I need to have all the extra sugars, manual testing kit, and my phone all fit in here. So it's gonna be a little bit of weight, but I think it'll be all right. So gonna do a quick shakeout run with it, and then we're good to go.
A few moments later.
I might be on board the fanny pack train. So I can't even call that a shakeout run. That was only half a mile, and it was basically just to test how well I liked the pack. I really like it. I kept my pace kind of where I would be for like a quarter mile and then slowed down. It didn't jostle, and I know half a mile probably isn't the best test, but I'm hoping it'll work. It pretty much has to work. I have to have all this stuff on me, so it'll be all right. But anyway, that was the last, at least, run before the marathon tomorrow, so excited. After that, it was time to head to St. George to visit the marathon convention and get my bib and drop pack. Just rolled up to the convention, picked up the bib, good to go. Oh, I didn't know all 48 of my cousins were running this marathon. After that, we went to some of the tourist attractions in St. George, like this cool temple, and then headed right home to make sure we got some good rest. All right, we're a little less than 12 hours out, which is crazy, but feeling pretty good. I'm very excited. I guess the only nerves I have are I haven't really done a race before, so I just hope everything with sugars and making sure I stay alive is kind of the important part. So super excited, but I hope I'll be able to sleep tonight. We have a very early morning. I think our bus, we have to shuttle to the start line, and the bus leaves at like 4:15. We live just under an hour away from where the shuttle picks us up, so we need to wake up at like 2:15, 2:30, drive to St. George, and then hop on a shuttle, drive to the start line, and then we might have to wait there for a sec, but all part of the fun. So we're excited. Hopefully we can get some sleep tonight. Going to bed at 8:30. It's got to be a record. We're going to set alarms for 2, 2:05, 2:10, so we are sure we get up.
The next day.
Rise and shine. It's go time. I wish I could say I put a lot of thought into my running kit, but I didn't. I cooked up some breakfast, and we kept it light for obvious reasons. Said a prayer that I wouldn't die, and I finished up eating. Now, I wanted to write the motto down on my arm so I didn't forget, but I also wanted to write my condition down in case I went down. And like that, I made sure I had everything I needed in my bag, grabbed some electrolytes and water for the drive, and we got in the car. All right, drive to St. George. Here we go.
Oh, 3 in the morning.
So we made it to St. George, but I just got a notification that my blood sugar's at 180. It's probably because I've been sipping on that like body armor a little bit. So gonna take 2 units of fast acting. I haven't taken fast acting in months, so I'm hoping this goes well. I would just much rather start the race lower and know I can always get myself higher than start my race too high and feel awful going into it. So we're gonna try it out. All right, we are about to hop on the shuttles to go to the start line. So ready for it. All right, we are here at the start line. I think there's 5,000 other people running the marathon, so it's gonna get a little bumping up here. It's pretty chilly. I think it's 55 degrees, but there's some pretty strong wind. So anyway, we've got, let me see, got another like hour 45 until the race starts. So I'm gonna try and keep myself warm and have some fun. But anyway, we got a decent wait. When it was finally go time, they lined us all up and they had a sweet drone show to hypnotize all of us into thinking this marathon was a good idea. And finally, After a 3-2-1 countdown, they gave us the big green go. Now, quick disclaimer, and part of me does feel really bad about this, but I did not want to be worried about vlogging during this run. It was my first marathon, and I wanted to reach that target goal of sub 3:30. So, I'm going to take you on a highly theatrical reproduction of my first marathon. When I crossed the start line, I probably could have started a little slower, but I was proud of myself for keeping myself at a slower pace for at least the first 2 miles and easing into my target mile time. I could tell that my training and the taper that I had done for 2 weeks prior to the marathon had paid off because my legs felt incredible. And starting off, it was hard not to get caught up in all the energy and the vibes and just start sprinting and weaving in and out of people. But I was proud of myself for keeping that pace slow for the first 2 miles and then reaching my target mile pace at around mile 3. And it was about mile 3 that I saw the 3-hour 40-minute pacers and thought to myself, oh, if I can catch the 3-hour 30 pacers, I'll beat my sub 3:30 goal because I started after them. So I held my pace and it was smooth sailing until I hit Veo Hill at mile 8. Now, anyone who has run the St. George Marathon knows about Veo Hill because it's one of only 2 places in the entire marathon that's uphill. And it's a hill. So I naturally slowed down a little bit, and I was even tempted to walk and take a breather. But like all the thousands of crazy people around me who were trucking up this hill, I had to keep going. We made it to the top, and after Veo Hill, I set back into my pace for the next 10 miles and felt absolutely golden. I nailed my fuel schedule, I was grabbing waters at every aid station, and I held my pace pretty well. And I was even enjoying the wonderful scenery. Eventually, I caught up to the 3-hour 30-minute pacers, and I was stoked that I was on track to hit my goal. But then around mile 18, I started to notice everything hurting, and really hurting. I may or may not have miscalculated my fuel, which led to me undercutting my sodium intake substantially, aka I was dehydrated. But that, coupled with the 1,500 feet of elevation I had just pounded my quads down, left my legs cramping horrifically. I started grabbing 2 or 3 waters at every aid station, not realizing that that didn't really help me, and trying desperately to keep up with the 3:30 pacers. By mile 21, it took every ounce of self-will and every muscle in my body to keep moving my legs. I could see the city, and being familiar with St. George, I knew we were so close. But it was like someone had put lead in Jello, and those were my legs. At this point, I was actually stopping at the aid stations and grabbing like 4 or 5 waters, and mile 23 was my slowest of the whole marathon at 9 minutes and 5 seconds. The most frustrating part was when I'd stop at these aid stations to chug water, I would watch the 3:30 pacers with the group keep going. And they got further and further, and it was like I was watching my goal go out of reach. I remember thinking to myself, I could just stop running. It would be so easy. I could blame it on my diabetes, and right there at one of the last aid stations, I could just call it. And I almost did. But then, with a sudden burst of motivation, I got myself running again. I put my head down. I even caught the 3:30 pacers, and I gave the last stretch of this marathon everything I had. And so as I'm grunting my way through the streets of downtown St. George, I saw the final turn up ahead. And even with the finish line in sight, the best I could do was just hold my pace. Now, I've heard a lot about the energy of marathons. They're electric, and there's people cheering, and it's a complete high for any runner. And I got a little bit of that at the beginning of the race when everybody was lined up and we started. But for the next 26 miles, there was nothing. It was just me, my mind, and the road. But those final 0.2 miles, if that, were absolutely incredible. Crowds lined to both sides of the street and cheered everybody through those final steps. At this point, my body and my legs were so dead that I didn't really even notice anything else going on, but I could feel that energy and I could see the finish line. And I remember thinking how good it would feel to just be done, to cross that finish line and stop running, to chug 14 gallons of water, to just be done. Right before I passed under that final arch, I saw the clock. The time processed in my mind right as I crossed the finish line. I did it. My first marathon done in 3 hours, 27 minutes, and 24 seconds. I am no runner, but I knew right when I crossed that finish line that this marathon was one of the most impressive feats I've ever accomplished. And it wasn't because of the time or the distance or any of that. It was because of how hard I knew I had to push myself. And I just wanted to find my wife and celebrate, but my body had other plans. Almost immediately after the finish line, I started feeling weird. Someone handed me a medal, and being absolutely oblivious to everything around me, I didn't even hear my family cheering for me 15 feet away. I followed the crowd through the misters. I tried to stop and stay there for like an hour, but was told to keep going. Someone handed me a water bottle. I slammed it. I kept walking and saw a trough of ice and more water, so I grabbed another water and slammed it. And it was around this time that I started wondering why everyone else looked so good. Nobody else was limping. Why did I feel so weird? I was burning up and freezing at the same time. So I rounded a corner and I plopped down on the first piece of grass that I could find. And it felt so good just to sit. But all of a sudden, out of nowhere, this worker comes up and he's like, "Hey, we want to keep people moving through this area. You can't sit here." And so I got up and, I like fumbled to my feet. And I probably only made it like 10 or 15 feet before I needed to lay down again. I was freezing, and in addition to my body seizing up and my legs hurting so bad, I started to feel my blood sugars tanking. Thankfully, my wife found me as I laid down close to one of the med tents. And when they came over and told me the area was only for medical attention, I told them I was a type 1 diabetic and I needed to sit for a sec to get my sugars up. They obliged, and after 10 minutes, some grapes, and me knowing that my sugars were good, I got up and we walked over to the drop bag station to pick up our bags from before the race. So I laid down by this station and I was freezing, and so I started like shivering and shaking uncontrollably. And I thought that if I could just slow down and control my breathing, that it would go away, but I couldn't. It was the weirdest thing. And weirder than that, all of the sudden, I tried to shift my right leg and my right quad just seized up. And I watched in like half amazement and half horror as I knew the muscle was contracting, and I saw this cramp form this bump in my leg that I could see through my shorts. It was gnarly. And so it lasted maybe 10 or 15 seconds, and I couldn't move, and it hurt so bad, but it went away. And then after maybe a minute or two, I tried to move my leg again, and the same thing happened. And so at this point, I didn't really know what to do. I couldn't move without my right leg cramping up. I was shivering uncontrollably. My blood sugars were finally back to a stable level, but I didn't know what to do. And so my mother-in-law ran and got someone from the med team. They came over, and this doctor said, "You're probably just severely dehydrated. We recommend an IV of saline to bring your levels back, and we can escort you over to the med tent." They plopped me in a recliner, and I got hooked up to an IV. It took 5 minutes for me to stop having the quad seizure cramp things, but I was still shivering uncontrollably for probably 45 minutes. After I was cleared, I walked to the car and headed home. I was done. I look back on this marathon and am so glad that I did it. with my injuries and being out of commission for a while, I haven't been able to challenge myself like this for the prior 2 years. So as much as I wanted to quit and as bad as it hurt, it was so refreshing. And I know that's probably a weird word, but refreshing in the way that if I can't find ways to challenge myself and do things that push my limits, I feel like I get in these ruts and they're really hard to break out of. And so 2023, being able to run and accomplish this goal was huge for me. And I know the joke of marathon runners is that they'll never stop talking about it. That being said, I think there's something to the fact that there is this level of confidence that it instills in you, that you just accomplished this massively impressive physical feat for anybody. And I'm really proud of that. So yeah, I got this thing done and I did it in my target goal of sub 3:30. So the question is, what do I do now? Well, what if I told you that the main goal of 2023 wasn't even running a marathon at all? The main goal of 2023 was running around the country. I wasn't done.